Henry Ford industrialized America. Many of us know Henry Ford as the founder of the automobile in the early 1900s, but many of us do not know that he also helped America with more things than just the automobile and transportation. Henry Ford industrialized America because of these 3 points. 1. Henry Ford was an inventor, Henry Ford was an engineer, and Henry Ford was a businessman. Henry Ford was an inventor. In William Hoare's Enterprise of Henry Ford, he explains how 1,500 American auto manufacturers tried to come up with a production line to speed up assembly in Henry Ford's automobile, and Henry Ford quickly realized that we can't afford to pay this many people to do so many things working with their hands because he could not keep people in the job. They were not interested in working that hard for that little pay. And Henry Ford, being the inventor he was, came up with a great idea of an assembly line to speed up the whole process, which he did. He beat the competition who was trying to help him. They were trying to beat him to helping the automobile he created to begin with. But he also not only created the automobile, but then again sped up the process with his assembly line. His assembly line provided multiple jobs for many people in that time era. Like I said, the people were struggling to stay there because they were not interested in working so hard with their hands. He not only provided jobs and the opportunity for them to stay because they had easier work, but he provided jobs for the handicapped and the Negro community as well. He was open, he was not prejudiced against any race, and he let them all work within his companies with his new assembly line. That is why Henry Ford was an inventor. For my second point, Henry Ford was an engineer. In 1891, Ford became an engineer with the Edison Illuminating Company. After his promotion to chief engineer, a few years later, he devoted time to his personal interests, which were the gasoline engines. Once he was established with his new job, he took his money that he was making and his extra time and started, working on the motor that he thought was going to be the future of America. And even though people, did not agree with what he was doing, he didn't let them get him down, and his dream was to create a motor for America. And after about 10 years, it took him 10 years from 1891 to about 1902, he had come up with the first model for the motor, which was a 26 horsepower, 4-cylinder motor that then he put in his Model T and provided to the public in 1908. After his Model T was established in America, he realized that the Americans had a need for speed and wanted to go into the racing world. So Henry Ford came out with the Model 999, which was an 80 horsepower motor, which then increased the land speed record to 97 miles per hour in 1912. That is why Henry Ford is an engineer. For my third point, Henry Ford was a businessman. In Henry, A Life of Henry Ford by Walter Hayes, he explains how Ford Motor Company had been public for less than half of its 100-year life. General Motors, who was Ford's main competition, had been public for 40 years before Ford had even thought about going public. Ford's quoted in New York Times was he claimed that GM went public to prevent from going out of business. He was a family-oriented man. He had family working for him in his company, and he did not want to go public because he thinks that going public and being traded in the stock market means going into debt, which essentially it is because you are letting people invest in you, but you still owe them money. And Ford was not about that. It took the 40 years until 1956 when Henry Ford I passed away, then his son and the rest of his family initially went public in 56. So that's why Ford has been public now. It was never the original Henry Ford's idea to go public. After his thoughts on GM, they had a $3.2 billion company in 1956 when Ford passed, and they sold 10.2 million shares at $63